Ethan Parker grew up in a town most people just drove through without a second glance. You know the type. One main street, one high school, one grocery store. In his corner of rural Missouri, nothing moved fast, and that included dreams. Now, Ethan's family wasn't poor, but they weren't exactly comfortable either. His parents were hard workers, the bills got paid, there was always food on the table, but ambition, that was a quiet, almost forgotten thing in their house. Survival mattered a lot more than vision. In school, Ethan was just average. He wasn't a bad student, but he wasn't a great one either. Teachers would describe him with words that sort of stuck to him for years. Nice, reliable, consistent, but nobody, not once, ever said he was exceptional. After he graduated, Ethan did what most people around him did. He stayed. He got a job at the local supply company, stacking inventory, loading up trucks, just clocking in and clocking out, day after day, like everyone else. By the time he hit 25, his life looked perfectly fine from the outside. He had a steady job, a decent paycheck, and he hung out with his friends on the weekends. But deep down, something felt off. He wasn't unhappy, not really. He wasn't desperate, he just felt unfinished. It was like his life was stuck on a loop, a constant replay. Every Monday was a carbon copy of the last one. Every year just quietly slipped by. He wasn't failing, not by any stretch, but he wasn't really becoming anything either. Sometimes, late at night, Ethan would sit on the hood of his old car in the apartment parking lot, just staring up at the dark, star-filled sky. He didn't have a clue what he wanted, but he knew, with a certainty that ached, that he wanted more than this endless loop. The problem wasn't a lack of opportunity, it was a lack of belief. In small towns like his, people don't tell you not to dream, they just don't talk about dreaming at all. It's not on the menu. So, Ethan stayed quiet, keeping his formless dissatisfaction to himself. Until one single moment changed everything. When he was 28, Ethan went to his high school reunion. He wasn't expecting much. Just a room full of familiar faces, a few old jokes, and a safe dose of nostalgia. But one conversation, a casual, throwaway comment, stuck with him. A former classmate, someone he barely knew, clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Man, I really thought you'd be doing something big by now." The comment wasn't meant to be cruel. It was just an observation, but it hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. That night, he lay wide awake in bed, the words echoing in his mind. He started thinking, if nothing changes, if I just keep doing this, will I still be right here at 40? And that thought, that image of himself at 40, in the exact same spot, terrified him. It wasn't because his life was bad, it was because it felt utterly and completely wasted. The very next morning, Ethan made a decision that nobody else even noticed. He decided to stop living his life passively. It wasn't some grand, dramatic gesture. He didn't quit his job. He didn't pack his bags and move away. He didn't post on social media about his new chapter. He just quietly, almost secretly, started taking full responsibility for his own growth. He started waking up a little earlier each day, not to hustle or grind, but to learn. He began reading books, anything he could get his hands on about discipline, about money, communication, and self-control. During his long drives for work, he swapped the radio for podcasts. He consciously stopped numbing himself with endless scrolling on his phone. At first, absolutely nothing happened. Weeks went by, then months. His paycheck was exactly the same. His job was exactly the same. His town was exactly the same. And the old doubts started creeping back in. That voice in his head whispered, "This isn't working. You're not special. Remember, just be grateful for what you have and stop trying to be something you're not." But this time, Ethan kept going. Because something fundamental inside him had shifted. He had stopped asking the universe, "What is life going to give me?" and had started asking himself, "Who am I becoming?" That one simple question changed everything. He started treating his body with more respect. He began exercising regularly not to get ripped or to impress anyone, but to build the muscle of discipline. He cleaned up his habits. He cut back on drinking on the weekends. He took control of his time instead of letting it just slip away. People around him noticed the small changes, but nobody really said anything. Quiet growth doesn't really attract a lot of attention. By the time he was 30, Ethan had developed a set of skills that most people around him simply didn't have. He learned how to communicate effectively, how to plan ahead. He mastered consistency. He became the person who was reliable, especially under pressure. So, when a leadership role opened up at work, he applied for it. He didn't expect much, but he got an interview. And during that interview, something surprising happened. Ethan didn't oversell himself. He didn't brag or inflate his accomplishments. He just calmly and clearly explained how he approached responsibility, how he solved problems, and how he learned from his mistakes. The manager leaned back in his chair, looked at him for a long moment, and said, "You're different." Ethan got the promotion. It wasn't life-changing money. Not at first, but it was direction. It was a step, and Ethan leaned into it. He learned how to lead a team without letting his ego get in the way. He learned how to solve bigger, more complex problems. He learned how to stay calm when everyone else was panicking. By the time he was 33, Ethan was managing teams larger than the entire department he used to work in, stacking boxes. But the success didn't make him loud or arrogant. It made him more grounded. He started saving his money aggressively. He learned about investing and did it wisely. He planned for the long term. There were no flashy purchases, no chasing status symbols. From the outside, people just assumed he was lucky, and whenever he heard that, Ethan would just smile. Luck had absolutely nothing to do with it. By 36, Ethan was financially stable, deeply respected at his job, and possessed a quiet, unshakable confidence. He still lived in the same town, but now, it felt different. It didn't feel smaller or like a trap. It just felt familiar. It was home. One afternoon, Ethan ran into a younger coworker who looked a bit lost, just like he used to feel. The kid said, "Man, how did you get your life so together? It seems like you have it all figured out." Ethan thought about it for a moment. He thought about the late nights, the early mornings, the doubts, the slow, invisible progress. Then he gave the most honest answer he could. "I stopped waiting to feel special, and I just started doing the work anyway." And that was the simple, unglamorous truth. Ethan Parker didn't escape his small town. He didn't have some dramatic reinvention overnight. He didn't become famous or a millionaire. He just became intentional. And that, right there, made all the difference. Because here's the truth that I think so many of us need to hear. You don't need a dramatic backstory to change your life. You don't need some once-in-a-generation talent that turns heads. You don't need permission from anyone to start. What you need is discipline when no one is watching. You need consistency when your progress feels completely invisible. And you need patience when the results are painfully slow to arrive. Being average isn't a prison, it's a choice, it's a starting point. And the moment you choose growth quietly, consistently, and relentlessly, your life begins to change. Not all at once, but forever. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more. See you in the next one.